He was wearing bunny slippers. That was the first thing Jax noticed when the old man stepped off the convoy transport for a quick leg stretch. Tattered gray cargo pants, a utility vest that looked 2 decades past its expiration date, and pink, fluffy bunny slippers stomping into the red dust of Rave X9. Jax, who had just graduated from escort training last month, chuckled and nudged the driver. "Check out Grandpa Apocalypse. Guy looks like he took a wrong turn out of a thrift store time capsule." The old man didn't even glance at them. He pulled a half-burned cigarette from his pocket, lit it with a plasma flare, and stared at the mountains like they'd insulted his mother. The moment should have been funny, was funny, but the way he stood there, still and focused, like he was listening for something none of them could hear. That was the moment everything changed. The civilian convoy moved slowly through the rugged canyon pass, deep within a forgotten sector of Rave X9's neutral zone. War had long since passed through here, leaving only rusted bones of wrecked walkers and the scorched remains of failed settlements. The convoy consisted of 4 armored transports, 2 escort speeders, and about 3 dozen civilians being ferried to the evacuation point at Delta Ridge. It was supposed to be a quiet ride. Low risk, high boredom. A milk run. Jax hated milk runs. He sat in the rear escort speeder, eyes lazily scanning the rock formations flanking the narrow passage. His helmet visor flickered slightly, cheap tech, and he smacked the side of it with a sigh. Inside his transport, civilians chatted nervously or stared out windows. One of them, a young mother with twins, asked for a blanket. Another complained about the protein bars being stale. The usual. But there was one guy, Darren Vale, according to the manifest, who didn't talk. Didn't move much. Sat in the back corner of the second-to-last transport, one leg stiff like it had been shattered and reset wrong. He had barely blinked the whole trip. Didn't eat. Didn't drink. Just watched. At first, Jax thought the guy was some ex-merc who'd had too many rough landings. Maybe a burned-out engineer who'd seen too much. Then he noticed the tattoos, mostly faded under layers of dust and sun damage. Not decorative. Markings. Clearance tattoos. Ones that only popped up in black site personnel files and didn't officially exist. That's when Jax started wondering why a broken-down old man with military-grade scars and bunny slippers was hitching a ride on a refugee convoy. Halfway through the pass, a high-pitched ping rattled through the escort's comms. A distress signal. Automated. Short range. Repeating. "This is Life Form Beacon Alpha Kilo. Child in distress. Repeat, child in distress. Coordinates uploaded. Immediate assistance required." Jax sat up. Control, we got a distress ping. Just outside the ridge bend." The lead convoy operator, a woman named Mara, responded with a sigh. "We're not in a position to investigate side paths. We're stretched thin and behind schedule. But it's a kid." A long pause. Then the convoy lead veered slightly. "Fine. Front vehicle diverting. We'll check it out. The rest, hold position until cleared." The first 2 trucks turned down a narrower trail off the main path. Jax's speeder stayed with the rear. The canyon walls pressed closer, unnervingly tight. The radio crackled. Then silence. And then chaos. From the cliffs above, plasma fire exploded downward without warning. The lead escort went up in flames. Debris scattered across the ravine. Panic erupted inside the civilian trucks. Screams filled the comms. Ambush. Raiders descended from the ridges, clad in scavenged armor with glowing visors and jury-rigged exoweapons. Dozens of them, maybe more. Organized. Too organized. Not your average backwater bandits. "Defensive position! Protect the convoy!" barked Jax's squad leader, before getting vaporized mid-sentence. Jax ducked behind his speeder, returning fire, but they were pinned. Plasma blasts lit up the rocks. One transport tried to reverse but got hit with an EMP bolt, freezing its systems. That was the one with the quiet old man. The side door of the disabled transport hissed open with a grinding noise. Out stepped Darren Vale. Bunny slippers and all. No panic. No fear. Just quiet fury. The nearest raider barked something unintelligible and charged him. Darren raised his arm. A section of his sleeve retracted with a soft mechanical hiss, revealing a matte black device bolted to his forearm. It shimmered like hot oil in the sun. The man flexed his fingers, and the raider exploded mid-sprint. A single, silent motion. No flash. No sound. Just gone. That was the moment Jax realized this guy wasn't a civilian. A second raider opened fire. Darren ducked, rolled, and emerged holding a curved blade that hadn't been there a second ago. The blade moved like liquid, cutting through armor like paper. Darren weaved through the chaos, silent and terrifyingly fast for someone supposedly crippled. Every move calculated. Every kill surgical. He disarmed a sniper by catching the bolt midair. He disassembled a plasma rifle in 2 fluid motions and repurposed the pieces into a mine, which he casually tossed under an incoming hoverbike. The mine beeped once and turned the canyon floor into flaming rubble. Jax ducked lower, jaw hanging. "What the hell is he?" "Ghost knife," muttered a dying raider nearby, bleeding from a cauterized gash. "They sent the damn ghost knife." The name hit Jax like a bullet. Ghost knife wasn't real. Just a campfire story told by failed mercs and paranoid warlords. A specter of Black Ops folklore. The man who wiped out entire syndicates without a trace. Vanished from every camera. Never showed up in satellite feeds. Rumor said he once turned an entire lunar prison into a crater just to silence one target. And here he was. In bunny slippers. On a refugee convoy. And he was very real. As the battle turned, the raiders panicked. Some tried to flee. One yelled into a broken calm. "Abort! It's not worth it, pull back!" But it was too late. Darren, Ghost Knife, activated something on his gauntlet. A high-frequency pulse rippled through the air. Jax's helmet sparked, temporarily blinding him. When he could see again, half the enemy force was either down or disabled. The rest were running. Ghost Knife walked through the smoke, unspeaking, weapon humming quietly. He glanced at Jax, then looked away. Not a word exchanged. Just a nod. Like the kid had passed some kind of test. Then he turned toward the last standing raider, a woman who had dropped her weapon and was backing up with hands raised. "I didn't know," she stammered. "They told us it was just a soft target." Ghost Knife tilted his head. "Still came," he said. And then she was unconscious, hit with a non-lethal stun dart so precise it clipped her between the eyes without drawing blood. Ghost Knife holstered his weapon. Then limped, ever so slightly, back toward the transport. The bunny slippers squelched in the ash. The silence after the ambush was heavier than the smoke still curling off the wreckage. Jack stood with his rifle slack in his hands, staring at the back of the old man who had just dismantled a squad of professional raiders without so much as breaking a sweat. Civilians peeked out from behind twisted transport doors, whispering, confused, terrified. Some began sobbing, others praying. No one understood what had happened. They saw a convoy under attack, and then a ghost walked out and made the problem disappear. Darren, no Ghost Knife, sat back down on the same bench he'd occupied for the entire trip, his expression unreadable. The charred remains of his sleeve revealed more than just strange tech. Old scars ran down his arm, some surgical, others savage, like the man had been stitched together more than once. He flexed his hand slowly, then tapped a code into his wrist gauntlet. A subtle shimmer passed over his skin, and the device powered down, retracting like it had never been there. Jax approached slowly, unsure whether to salute, run, or just faint on the spot. He cleared his throat, failing to sound anything but rattled. "So, you're not an engineer, huh?" Ghost Knife didn't look up. "What gave it away? Could have been the liquid murder blade. Or the fact you atomized a guy with your wrist." There was a pause. Then, to Jax's genuine surprise, the old man chuckled, a low, dry sound like someone finding humor in a particularly dark joke. "They always go for the wrist. Never learn," he said. Jax sat across from him, his armor covered in dust, dented from the skirmish. The smell of burning rubber and melted plasma coils hung in the air. "Okay," Jack said, dropping his voice. "Your ghost knife. Or you were. You're supposed to be retired. Dead even. That's the idea. So what the hell are you doing on a civilian convoy on Ravex 9? Darren leaned back against the metal wall, closed his eyes for a moment. Then opened them again. "I was tracking something. Not the raiders. They were an inconvenience. I was after cargo." Jax blinked. "Cargo?" "The crate in Transport 3. Labeled as medical stasis equipment. That's just wait." Jax frowned. "Are you saying that crate isn't for meds?" "No. It's not. It's a mobile biocontainment unit. Classified Level 9. Unauthorized movement of one of those. That's a galactic felony." Jax looked toward Transport 3, where a massive metal crate sat strapped against the wall, humming faintly. "Okay, and what's inside?" "I don't know yet," Darren said. "But someone went through a lot of trouble to sneak it onto a civilian transport. Which means it's something dangerous. Or valuable. Or both." Before Jax could respond, his comm buzzed. "Weak signal. Static." But a voice pushed through, "Mara, from the front transport. We're back on main path. Took a hit but pushing through. Casualties minimal. Rear convoy status?" Jax glanced at Ghost Knife, who gave a short nod. Raiders neutralized," Jax replied. "We're recovering." "Good. Keep moving. We'll meet at Delta Ridge. And Jax, good work." He killed the comm, still reeling. Nothing about this day made sense anymore. Raiders armed like pros. A ghost from Black Ops riding along like a tourist. And now a mysterious crate ticking quietly in the back like the universe's worst Christmas gift. Jax rubbed his temples. "You think the raiders were after the crate?" "No question," Darren said. "They knew what they were doing. Formation, fire discipline, fallback signals. Not amateurs. And they didn't want loot. They didn't even touch the civilians. But if they wanted the crate so bad, why didn't they just grab it and run? They weren't prepared for me." Jax gave him a side eye. "Nobody ever is." Darren ignored the jab and stood up. The limp was more noticeable now, like the exertion had taxed him harder than he wanted to admit. He moved to the crate and ran his gauntlet over its surface. Symbols flickered, biohazard warnings, containment seals, redacted identifiers. Jax came up beside him. "You can't crack it?" "I can," Darren said. "But not here. It's sealed with a temporal lock. Any wrong attempt and we risk a meltdown. A meltdown. Of the genetic or thermonuclear kind. Depending on what's inside." "That's comforting." As they spoke, one of the surviving raiders groaned nearby. Jax turned and saw the man crawling toward a discarded rifle. Ghost Knife didn't move. He just raised a finger. The rifle sparked and ejected its magazine. The raider cursed and collapsed. Jax blinked. "You booby-trap rifles? Wouldn't you?" They hauled the wounded into the rear transport. Civilians began to regain their composure, asking questions, peeking out. One little girl wandered up to Darren and offered him a cracked water canister. He accepted it wordlessly, gave her a small nod. The girl smiled, then ran back to her mother. "She thinks you're a hero," Jax said. "She's young. That mean you're not?" Darren didn't answer. By dusk, the convoy was rolling again. The canyon pass opened into wider badlands, where fractured moons cast twin shadows on the jagged terrain. Every once in a while, Darren would check the crate. Still humming. Still locked. Jax stared at it like it might grow legs and attack them. He finally asked, "What do you think is inside? Weapon? Prototype?" "I think," Darren said slowly, "it's not the first time someone's tried to move something like this. And I think whoever wanted it back didn't expect resistance. So you're saying we're not done?" "No," he said. "Not even close. The last rays of sun disappeared behind the cratered ridge, painting everything in ash-gray twilight. That's when Darren's wrist device flared again, just for a second. "What's that?" Jax asked. "Something just activated a relay," Darren murmured. "Long-range scan just bounced off the crate." "Someone found us?" Darren nodded grimly. "And they're not sending more raiders." Jax gulped. "Then what?" Darren looked at the horizon. His voice was quiet. "Something worse." The night on Ravex 9 was colder than anyone expected. Wind whipped across the barren plain as the convoy creaked to a halt near an abandoned fueling station. Half the transports were limping along, jury-rigged together with spare parts, and the civilian passengers were too shaken to sleep. Jack stood watch on top of a scorched supply trailer, rifle resting on his lap, eyes darting between the crate and the ridgeline. He hated how quiet it was now. The kind of quiet that made your bones itch. Inside the second-to-last transport, Ghost Knife sat cross-legged in front of the mysterious crate, fingers dancing along his gauntlet's projection field. Streams of encrypted code shimmered in the air above it, shifting like oil in water. He'd been at it for nearly an hour, face locked in the kind of expression that told anyone nearby not to interrupt him unless the sky was literally on fire. Jax climbed down and entered the transport, clutching 2 mugs of lukewarm stimbrew. He handed one to Ghost Knife, who sniffed it, sipped once, and gave a grunt that could have meant appreciation or disgust. Jax took a seat on a crate labeled non-essential medical, though based on the dents, it had been used more as a seat than a supply bin. "So," Jax said, "any progress?" "Just enough to make me uncomfortable." "That's always good." Ghost Knife didn't smile. He reached forward and tapped one final command into the projection field. The crate emitted a long hiss, and a small panel on the front slid open, revealing a narrow interface screen. A single line of green text scrolled across it. "Containment status. Compromised. Awaiting genetic clearance." Jax frowned. "Compromised? What does that mean?" "It means something woke up." Before either of them could speak again, the convoy's warning system let out a low, vibrating pulse. Proximity alert. Someone, or something, was moving. Ghost Knife stood immediately. "Lock the crate down. Arm everyone still breathing." Jack scrambled outside and started shouting orders. Escort troops still alive from the ambush rallied fast. Civilians were ushered into the center of the convoy circle. Drivers turned on floodlights, bathing the area in harsh white light that only made the shadows deeper. Something moved beyond the light. A blur. Fast. Silent. Then another. Then 3. Ghost Knife activated his exosuit, and the air shimmered around him again. He stepped to the edge of the floodlight and stared into the darkness. "Not raiders," he said quietly. "What are they?" Jax asked, rifle up. "Scouts. Automated, maybe partially organic. Designed for speed and silence. Probably programmed to locate the crate, mark targets, and soften resistance before the main force arrives." Jack stared. "Softening us? We're already toast." From the edge of the light, one of the scouts lunged, a creature with plated armor fused to flesh, a mouth like a cracked open grinder, and limbs that bent the wrong way. Ghost Knife intercepted it midair, drove a shock blade through its core, and kicked it away before its acidic blood could touch the ground. The others followed. Chaos erupted. Troops fired in every direction. One of the scouts broke through and latched onto a transport, carving into the metal like it was paper. Civilians screamed as sparks rained down. Jax gunned one down, barely managing to track its erratic movement. Another tackled a soldier to the dirt, and dragged him into the darkness before anyone could react. Ghost Knife moved like he was part of the wind. His weapons were extensions of himself. He cut, twisted, redirected, every motion lethal. But even he was sweating now. "These aren't scouts," he growled. "They're triggers." "Triggers?" Jack shouted, ducking under a swiping claw. "They're bait. Designed to force our hand." And then the crate began to shake. The hum that had been steady for hours suddenly pulsed louder, deeper. The interface on the front glowed red. Containment failure, imminent. Jax backed away from it. That's not good. Ghost Knife threw a blade into the last charging scout, then bolted for the crate. His gauntlet flashed an override command, but the interface rejected it. Red light turned violet. Then black. The crate hissed. Steam poured from its seams. Bolts fired loose. The lid began to rise. Ghost Knife pushed Jax behind him and raised his shock blade. Inside the crate, something moved. At first, it looked like a silhouette, a humanoid shape curled in a fetal position. But then its eyes opened, glowing silver. It stood slowly, the stasis fluid dripping off its skin like molasses. Its body was sleek, metallic, but laced with muscle and synthetic tissue. A blend of man and machine. Not a cyborg. Something else. It stepped out, and the temperature dropped around it. Jax muttered, "What is that?" Ghost Knife didn't move. Project Serif. The creature turned its head toward them. Its expression was blank, eyes flicking between targets like it was assessing threat levels, calculating odds. Then it moved. 1 second it was standing still. The next, a soldier 15 feet away was cut in half. Jax screamed, ducked, rolled, fired, none of it mattered. Ghost Knife engaged the Serif directly, blades flashing, sparks flying. But for every strike he landed, the creature adapted. It changed stance. Changed speed. It was learning. Fast. "This thing's got predictive movement analysis," Ghost Knife shouted. "Every second we fight, it gets better." Jax tried to flank it, aimed for a joint, only to have the Serif turn and catch the bullet midair. Then it threw the bullet back. Jax dropped to the ground just in time. The bullet missed him by inches and buried itself in the wall behind. "This is insane!" Jax yelled. Ghost Knife grunted as the Serif knocked him back, sending him crashing into the side of a transport. His suit sparked, and his gauntlet flickered. "Get civilians out now!" he barked. Jax ran, grabbing the nearest driver. "Evac pattern 4! Move everyone to the fallback ridge!" The driver hesitated. "What about you? Move!" As the convoy began to retreat in chaos, Ghost Knife got back on his feet, blood trickling from his temple. The Serif was standing still again, watching him. "You recognize me?" Ghost Knife asked. The Serif tilted its head. "You should. I wrote the protocols that were used to build your species." The creature blinked. Then it smiled. And charged. Ghost Knife met it head on. This time, he didn't hold back. Plasma arced from his gauntlet. He overclocked the suit. Every move came with a cost. He was bleeding from the nose now, but he didn't care. The creature responded with its own inhuman grace. They clashed again and again, slamming into the earth, crushing metal, leveling one of the transports. Jax watched from the ridgeline, heart pounding, as the two titans battled in the firelight. Then Ghost Knife looked toward him. "Set the charges!" he roared. Jax nodded and pressed the detonator. The transport the Serif stood on exploded, the blast engulfing them both. Everything went white. The dust hadn't even settled when Jax stumbled down the ridge, lungs burning and ears ringing from the blast. The scorched husk of the transport still smoldered, glowing like an angry wound in the dark. Flames licked at twisted steel, and shrapnel glinted in the ash-filled wind. He half expected silence, a grim confirmation that Ghost Knife was gone and the creature had been atomized. But the second he stepped closer, a guttural thud echoed from within the wreckage. Then another. Metal groaned and shifted. Jax raised his weapon, heart thundering in his chest. One of the transport walls buckled outward like something was pushing from the inside. Then it tore open with a shriek of ripped alloy. The Serif stepped out, charred but intact. Its synthetic skin had blackened and cracked in some places, revealing glowing circuitry beneath, but it was still moving like it hadn't been touched. The smile was gone now, replaced with something far worse, an expression of absolute focus. It had evolved again. Jax backed away slowly, desperately scanning the wreckage. There was no sign of ghost knife. No motion. No voice over comms. Nothing. He cursed under his breath and fired at the Serif, each shot deflecting off its armored hide. It didn't even flinch. It just watched him like he was a piece of furniture that had learned to scream. Before it could move again, a voice crackled through Jax's comm, distorted but unmistakable. Deter that thing away from the sieves. Ghost knife. Alive. Jax nearly cried out in relief. Where the hell are you? South of the crater. There's a fuel cache buried under an old mining station. Lure it there. I'll handle the rest. You're alive? Barely. Don't make it count for nothing. The Serif stepped forward, and Jax did the only thing that made sense. He ran. He ducked under fallen beams and leapt over cracked terrain, shouting into his comms for the evac crew to move faster. The civilians were already pushing toward the southern cliffs. His legs screamed with every step, but he didn't look back. He could feel it behind him, a presence in the air, like gravity had grown teeth. When he reached the abandoned station, he dove inside and skidded behind a console, chest heaving. The Serif followed moments later, stepping into the broken structure like it owned the place. Its eyes scanned the walls, tracking the residue of Jax's movement. Every footfall was calculated, deliberate, like it was stalking prey it had already decided to kill, just slowly. Jax peeked from behind cover and saw the fuel tanks, half buried in the rubble, leaking a translucent fluid that shimmered in the moonlight. He tapped his comm again. Targets in the zone. Where are you? Ghost Knife's voice came through, weaker this time. Above you. Jax looked up and saw him, perched on the crumbling scaffolding high above the station, half his exosuit blown off, blood dripping from a gash across his side. He was holding a small device in one hand. A manual trigger. You're gonna drop the whole place? Only if you keep it right there, Ghost Knife said. The Serif suddenly turned, eyes locking onto him, as if sensing the trap. It moved to bolt. Ghost Knife didn't wait. He leapt from the scaffolding and landed on the creature's back, jamming a second detonator onto its spine. It bucked violently, trying to throw him off, but he clung tight, driving a blade deep into its side. The creature howled, a sound that didn't belong in any world, and slammed him against the wall. The detonator beeped twice, then stuck. Jax sprinted for the exit as Ghost Knife rolled away from the Serif and slammed his gauntlet into the floor, activating the final charge. The mine station erupted in a fireball that lit up the desert for miles. Jax was thrown off his feet, landing hard on his side near the outer ridge. He sat up dazed, as the flames rose behind him like a sunrise of destruction. Smoke poured into the sky, mixing with dust and ash. The mining station was gone. Just a blackened pit remained. Nothing moved. He waited, seconds ticking into minutes. No movement. No shimmer. No shadow. Just silence. Then his calm buzzed again. You alive down there? Ghost Knife's voice was hoarse. Jax exhaled hard. Barely. You. Still kicking. From the far side of the ridge, Ghost Knife emerged, limping heavily, his suit in tatters and one arm dangling uselessly at his side. He looked like death itself. Jax helped him the last few feet, practically carrying him. That thing dead? Jax asked, still scanning the crater. No. But it won't be regenerating anytime soon. They both sat down, exhausted, staring at the smoldering pit. The civilians were regrouping in the distance, the convoy battered but mostly intact. The night was finally quiet. Real quiet. So, Jax said, you were just gonna die with that thing, huh? I figured it was 50-50. Ghost Knife replied. You always do crazy stuff like that. Only on weekdays. Jax chuckled, then groaned. His ribs hurt. What now? Now? Ghost Knife stared at the stars. Now someone up the ladder gets a message. They tried to move something they shouldn't have. And the universe hit back. You think they'll come again? Oh, definitely. But next time, I won't be in slippers. Jax laughed again. I'm keeping one of those slippers, by the way. I'm gonna mount it on a plaque. This man saved our convoy, in fuzzy footwear. Ghost Knife smirked. Just slightly. As the first light of dawn began to touch the horizon, Jax helped him to his feet. Together, they walked back toward the convoy. Somewhere behind them, deep in the crater, the last embers of the Serif flickered once. Then went dark. And far away, in a boardroom orbiting a distant star, a man in a pressed uniform watched it all unfold on a secure screen. He sipped from a crystal glass and turned to a silent assistant standing nearby. Well, he said. Ghost Knife is still breathing. The assistant nodded. Do you want him eliminated? The man smiled. No. Not yet. He just proved the Serif is viable. Let's see how far he'll go to stop the next one. And somewhere else, deep under rock and steel, a second crate began to hum. 3 weeks later, Ghost Knife sat alone on the outer rim of a supply outpost built into the cliffs of a dust-choked moon called Eris 4. The place wasn't much, a fueling depot with half-functional defense turrets, 2 barkeeps, and a scrapyard run by a guy who looked like he'd been grown in grease. That was exactly why Ghost Knife chose it. No patrols. No diplomats. No eyes. He kept his arm wrapped in a makeshift sling and his face half covered by a faded scarf, more to keep the dust out than for disguise. He didn't care if someone recognized him anymore. He wasn't hiding. He was waiting. The bartender didn't even blink when Ghost Knife walked in. He just poured something brown and vaguely flammable into a cracked mug and slid it across the counter. Ghost Knife nodded once and took his seat at the far end of the bar, same as he had every evening for the past 4 nights. He said nothing. Drank slowly. Listened. On the 5th night, someone new entered the bar. She didn't look like trouble at first. That's what caught Ghost Knife's attention. No one dressed that clean in a place this dirty. Slim build, traveler's coat with reinforced stitching, and boots too polished for someone who claimed to be from the outer rings. She walked like a merc but didn't scan the room like one. She just made a beeline for the bar and ordered water. Nobody did that unless they were playing a part or waiting for a signal. Ghost Knife watched her in the mirror behind the bottles. She didn't glance his way once. That meant she already knew where he was. When her glass was half empty, she finally spoke. You made quite the crater, old man. He didn't turn around. A lot of craters in the galaxy. You'll have to be more specific. The one on Ravex 9. You turned a mining station into a bonfire. And a prototype into vapor. Didn't stick around to take pictures. You never do. Now he looked at her. She met his gaze in the mirror. No fear. No smugness either. That made her dangerous. Ghost Knife stood slowly, grimacing as his ribs shifted. Still cracked. Still healing. You here to offer a warning? He asked. No, she said, standing as well. I'm here to ask if you want to finish what you started. He tilted his head. That's supposed to be a question? She stepped closer, lowering her voice. They've activated another crate. Different design. Different location. The Serif you fought wasn't the first test, it was the baseline. Ghost Knife's fingers flexed slightly. And what do they want this time? Field testing. Controlled chaos. They're planting them in targeted zones. Letting them loose and watching what happens. He narrowed his eyes. Where's the next one? She slid a data chip across the bar, casual as tossing a tip. Ghost Knife caught it, held it up to the light. What's in it? He asked. Coordinates. Surveillance logs. Internal memos. Enough to burn 3 black sites to the ground. And what's stopping you? She shrugged. I don't do fire. You do. Ghost Knife slipped the chip into a hidden slot under his belt. What's your stake in this? They're not just releasing weapons, she said. They're splicing command subroutines into them. Trying to develop something that learns from battlefield chaos, then turns that learning into control. They're not just building soldiers. They're building generals. He didn't respond immediately. The silence between them was thick. Finally, he finished the last of his drink and stood fully, his posture straightening, his limp almost gone. "I swore I was out of this," he muttered. "You were," she replied. "But now it's personal." He looked at her sharply. "Why?" "They used my brother's DNA." That stopped him cold. Not because of the brother, but because of what that meant. Human templates. Emotional base layers. The kind of dangerous gamble no sane scientist approved of. "Where's the nearest crate?" he asked. She pulled a small transmitter from her coat and placed it gently on the table. The display lit up with a blinking dot in the middle of a forested zone on a terraforming colony called Oran V. "Off-grid colony," she said. "No formal government. Just settlers and builders. They think the crate's a power core." Ghost Knife stared at the dot. "It always starts with lies. And ends with graves." He nodded once. "You coming?" She raised an eyebrow. "I thought you worked alone." "Not anymore." They left the bar in silence, the wind outside still hurling dust through the narrow canyons of Eris 4. The night was quiet again. But it wasn't peaceful. Peace had been left behind somewhere in the wreckage of Rave X9. 2 days later, deep within the woods of Oran V, settlers gathered near the glowing crate they had been told was a reactor. A few engineers argued over its output readings, confused by the irregular pulses and strange heat signatures. One of them suggested calling for off-world support. Another laughed it off. No one noticed that the local wildlife had gone completely silent. No chirps. No footsteps. Just the faint hum of something that was very much alive. Hours later, when the crate finally opened, there were no witnesses left to report what came out. And far above, as Ghost Knife's drop ship entered the upper atmosphere, he sat quietly with his hand resting on his gauntlet, already glowing faintly. The war hadn't ended. It had just changed shape. And this time, it was personal.